If you'd like to earn CPE credit for listening to this episode, visit earmarkcpe.com. Download the app, take a short quiz, and get your CPE certificate. Continuing education has never been so easy. And now, on to the episode.
Hello and welcome to Oh My Not a Fraud, a true crime podcast where sometimes we need to emphasize that neither crime nor fraud occurred in this story so that we can avoid slander lawsuits. I'm Greg Kyte.
And I'm Caleb Newquist.
So, Caleb, like we like to do before we get into it, are you good if I read a nice 5-star review real quick?
Oh, I only enjoy the mean 5-star reviews, but if you must.
Well, this one's not mean, but this one's very unique as reviews go.
Okay.
Seth CPA 429 writes, quote, "I'm just here to get paid. Thanks, Greg," and gave us 5 stars. And that kind of puts me particularly in a bit of a moral pickle.
Yeah, it does. Because in, I believe, the Airbus episode, which I think was episode 71, you said you'd pay listeners $100 for every 5-star review. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I did. I need to re-listen to it to see exactly what the offer was. But apparently, Seth CPA 429 knows when an easy buck is out there to be made, and left us that 5-star review real quick. So here's my problem, Caleb.
Okay.
Is
Yes.
either I have to pay a bribe, which is ethically wrong, or I have to lie, which is also ethically wrong. So really, one way or another, I'm going to hell for being ethically compromised. So I think I'm just going to stiff Seth CPA 429 and go with the lie rather than the bribe, and stay $100 richer and just as ethically compromised.
I mean, I don't think you're going to hell. I
Oh.
mean, mostly because I don't believe in it. But
Okay.
but I'm looking at the review, and Seth CPA 429, who is probably born on April 29th, they didn't leave their Venmo handle, so I'm not sure how you could even fulfill this promised bribe. And like I said, I don't think you're going to hell. Your conscience is clear, at least in my book.
Nice. I love a good loophole out of hell. If you left us your Venmo, we would have totally paid you our bribe.
Right.
So and I'm sure if Seth CPA is listening, they're gonna write another 5-star review with their Venmo handle. Hopefully, one can hope. Well, if you like Oh My Fraud, please take a minute to write us a review. Who knows, we might feel obligated to read yours on the show. Also, if your firm is looking for in-house ethics or fraud training that doesn't suck, we do that too.
We also do keynote addresses at events and conferences. If you want more info on pricing and availability, send us an email at ohmyfraud@earmarkcpe.com.
So, Caleb, did I mention that in today's episode that it's not about fraud and that no one committed any crimes?
Wait, no. Are we changing the podcast? Is this a different podcast now? What are we talking about?
For this one, it kind of is.
Oh, okay.
Because just to make sure any and all listeners understand, no one in today's episode was ever formally accused or charged or convicted of committing any crimes.
But this is a true story. Something that actually happened to you, right, Greg?
I think let's tweak that and say it's based on a true story.
Okay.
So it is absolutely 100% true, except for the parts that I change or the stuff that I don't remember, because most of this happened over a decade ago now.
So you're changing the names and some of the details to protect the innocent.
That's exactly right, because we cannot overstate this. No one in this story or in the actual events on which this story is based was ever found to be guilty of anything by any court of competent jurisdiction.
Okay, so Greg, you did not start, before we kind of get into this story, I think it's important that we kind of lay the groundwork, create some context, set the scene, all those things. You did not, as dedicated listeners of the podcast know, you did not start your career as an accountant.
No.
You started your career as a middle school and math teacher.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So you go back to school,
Yeah.
You get the accounting degree, and you did a master's, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
You did
So
an MBA, or did you do an MS?
Oh, I did an MBA with kind of an accounting emphasis.
Yeah, an emphasis. Okay,
Yeah.
great. All right, so you did that, and what year is it? What year is this?
So this is, let's see, I finished up my accounting degree in 2008. So I think it was
Okay.
like spring of 2008. I finished the bachelor's in accounting and just rolled right into, I think I got the summer off, and then I started doing the MBA.
So 2 years in the executive MBA, and
Yeah.
did you interview on campus? How did you get? What was your first job after completing all the school?
So I was basically offered a job at a mid-sized local firm for right as soon as I finished my accounting degree. So I went ahead and took him up on that, and yeah, I finished the 2007-2008 school year in like right before Memorial Day.
Okay.
And I took a 3-day weekend, and on the Tuesday after Memorial Day, I started at the firm.
Okay. So tell us about that firm.
I was on the QuickBooks team. So I was in the technology department. I was in the QuickBooks team. They hired me for the QuickBooks team, knowing that I had never opened before that. So
Seems odd.
yeah, well, it was basically, I mean, again, it made sense because even the manager who hired me, she was like, "I'm hiring you because I think you're the right person for our firm. I can train you on the technical stuff."
Oh.
So, but I did have, so there was another manager in the firm. She was in the tax department,
Okay.
and she had a client, and at that client, it was a small business, and they had exactly one person at that what would you say? Someone who worked for the client's company who knew how to use QuickBooks.
Okay.
And that one person quit on them, and
So
so
it was the client's employee.
Yeah, it's the client's employee.
Okay.
So so they needed to get someone else in that client's company trained on QuickBooks.
Oh, like your firm was going to find somebody to take that job, or what?
No. They wanted me. So this tax manager snagged me and said, "Hey, Greg, how about you teach someone else at my client's company how to use QuickBooks?" So I was basically just going in to train a new person how to use QuickBooks, because I had a solid 3 months of QuickBooks under my belt.
You're a seasoned veteran by this point.
Although funny enough, I was a certified QuickBooks Pro advisor. You can knock that out in like a couple of weeks and a couple of quizzes. So I was that. But here's the crazy thing: I started going to this client. So I became part of the engagement with this client, and the very first thing I did, like I said, I was supposed to teach the boss's wife how to use QuickBooks.
Okay.
And I show
The
up,
boss at the client.
the boss of the client. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So his wife
His
also
wife works at this business.
Yes, exactly. And I show up, she is the sweetest, nicest person ever. Like so kind, so fun, very interested in me, asking me lots of questions, making me feel very seen. And she also very quickly tells me, she's like, so I mean, the way she painted it was like, basically I drew the short straw, and I'm the new person who has to learn QuickBooks. And she was like, I do not want to do this. And she was like, instead of teaching me how to do QuickBooks, will you just do it? And I was like, I mean, to me, I was like going, I will, if that's okay for me to do that, because again, I'm just looking for billable hours.
Right.
And if all of a sudden this goes from a few weeks of training someone the basics on QuickBooks to kind of this ongoing thing where I'm sort of like outsourced bookkeeping, outsourced, that sort of stuff for them, I go, that sounds awesome.
Yep.
So let's do that. So that's how the engagement started. And I loved working there. She was fantastic. Her husband, who was the boss of this company, he was nicest guy ever too. Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Very much enjoyed
the two
this.
nicest people in the world are married to each other?
Yes,
I'm immediately suspicious.
Are you?
Yeah, I don't like the sounds of this one bit. Before you go any further, I just want to like level set a little bit for the audience, but because we haven't mentioned it yet. But like, what kind of business was this?
So this was it was a medical office building. Basically, it was
like one building.
Yeah, one building.
Like a single building.
A single building, 100,000 square feet.
Okay.
Probably about, I'm going to say about 25 different owners. Maybe, yeah, I mean, it fluctuated a lot. So probably anywhere between 24 owners and 36 owners.
Okay.
And the owners were the doctors who had
Okay.
offices in the building. So it was basically like they invested in the building and then they would have an office in the building
Got it.
in which they invested.
Kind of like going in with your buddies on a house.
Yeah, kind of like that. Yeah, and it was let's see, what's the best way to say this? Oh, so the industry, it's not the medical profession. It's really commercial.
Sounds like a real estate business.
Yeah, it's commercial real estate, but
Yeah.
specifically commercial medical real estate.
Got it.
So
Cool. All right. So
yeah,
now,
that's how it worked.
Yeah. So tell us more about the boss. Like who's running this operation?
So great guy. Like I said, great guy.
Nicest guy ever, apparently.
Yeah, one of them. And again, I like I said, this was like a glimmer of light in my otherwise, dim first year job as an accountant. I would go and I would seriously. So I'm gonna, for the sake of the story, we're gonna call him John Bolton.
Oh, fun name.
Yeah, mostly because he looks so much like former Secretary of State John Bolton.
Huh.
That's but also to protect
Wait,
the innocent.
Secretary of
We'll
State
just call him
or
John
UN
Bolton.
ambassador? I'm gonna get to the
Should
bottom
we
of
fact
this
check real quick?
Former United States ambassador to the United Nations, and the 26th United States National Security Advisor. Okay,
Oh, now maybe that's what I'm thinking.
still
National
big
Security
jobs.
Advisor.
Those are big time jobs.
Yeah. So,
But yeah, he has a look. John
yeah,
Bolton.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
He's got a look.
And so again, you could tell that. Yeah. So anyways, that's the general vibe of this guy. Here's one other tidbit that's important to the story.
Okay.
Is that John Bolton was not an owner in the company.
Oh.
He was a manager for the company. So
So
he
it's
did
kind of like he was a hired gun.
Yeah. Well, and very much so. And again,
Was he a physician though? Was he a doctor?
Nope. He was not a doctor.
So he was a
never
business
doctor.
person. He knew how to run the type of business that these doctors were engaged in.
Yes, and so he didn't own in the company. He was the manager, but also one of the things that's very interesting. Doctors are incredibly busy because one thing that I found out, everybody thinks doctors are just they're wealthy. They just think doctors are wealthy.
Golf a lot.
No, that's the thing. They don't have time.
No, that's what I'm saying. That's what people think.
Yeah, that's what they think. But the interesting thing, now that I work so closely with so many doctors, I found out a strange thing about the profession is doctors, they're like the owner, they're the boss of their practice, but they're also like the main, if not only, technician for so it's like if you owned an HVAC business, but you also had to install all the HVAC units. That's basically what a doctor is, because they're the ones who have to perform the surgeries or whatever it is. They can't delegate that to someone else because they're the only ones who can do it. So doctors, incredibly busy. They need someone like this to be able to manage the investment that they have. So, but again, the other thing, and this is going to become important later in the story as well, is that John Bolton wasn't even an employee of the company. He was set up as an independent contractor. So he had his own LLC that had like a contract with the company to provide management services. So he didn't get like a W-2 from the company. He just, every month they just cut him a check for his, I guess we'll get into that. Periodically they would cut him checks to compensate him for his managerial services that he provided to the company.
Okay, so you've got this pleasant engagement, and there's some nepotism, right? But
Yeah.
nepotism isn't a crime. Nepotism that's the bread and butter of American business, Greg. But I guess I should ask the question: how much nepotism was going on in this business?
So it was actually a lot of. So it wasn't just that he hired his wife as his assistant. There was also, there was employed in this organization was his wife, his son, his daughter, his stepdaughter, and his nephew, and that one employee that left, the one employee who did know QuickBooks, that was his other son who actually moved out of state. So So it was,
there wasn't a big dramatic falling out.
Interestingly enough, there definitely was some resentment.
Oh.
I mean, I could tell that there was some drama that occurred when that son left, but I wasn't privy to all of it, and a little bit of resentment on the boss's side that his son would leave him to go try to strike it out on his own. Yeah, kind of a sense like that. Yeah.
All right. Okay, so you got not a little bit of nepotism, a lot of nepotism.
Yes.
Anything?
Yeah, because there was maybe 4 other employees.
Okay.
That weren't relatives.
You're talking non-owners.
Yeah. No, and I'm just talking within the team.
Yeah.
There was maybe, other than family members, there was maybe like 3 or 4 people who weren't related to the Bolton family.
Okay. So I guess my next question is, what was unusual about this? Like, this is obviously a story that we're talking about.
Well, yeah.
And so what you're working on this client, there's some nepotism, so that's something.
Yeah.
But like, what else comes up?
Here was the big thing. At the end of the year, so again, part of my job, it evolved into closing the books. I had to close the books at the end of the year to get things ready for the tax return. And the CPA firm that I worked for also
they do an audit too, right?
It was just a compilation. That's all they needed to do.
Okay, so you're compiling these things. It's end of year, and what are some of the big things that you gotta like when you're closing the books at the end of the year? There's always like these big meaty things that you got to take care of. So like, what'd you have to take care of?
Everything was pretty normal. Like, again, a lot of the work had to do with all these loans that were extended to the various investors in the company, and making sure that those all tied out, and preparing reports for them to make sure that because
they knew so they would know where they stood.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
But in terms of closing the books out, everything was really normal, except there was this one glaring difference.
Oh boy.
And that was when, again, the manager that I worked under at the CPA firm, she tells me, she's like, hey, so one of the jobs we have to do to close out the books is we got to go back through all of the records, and we need to find all the checks that were written to John Bolton or to his LLC that he set up for his managerial services.
Okay.
And we need to make sure that ties out to his contracted amount that he's supposed to be paid every year, which was $144,000. Which right then that sounds pretty normal. Make sure that he got paid what he was supposed to get paid.
I think
right?
so. I think it does. Yes.
But then but then it was told to me this, like, if he ended up taking more money than $144,000, we need to figure out what that is, and we need to roll that into his loan that he has with the company.
Okay.
That's when things started sounding a little bit strange to me.
So had you, prior to this point, had this loan? Did you know anything about this loan?
I did not. I don't think I knew about the loan until I was closing out the books for that first year when I was on the engagement.
Okay, so you learned that there's this existing loan that he has from the company. So what did you learn about this loan?
Well, the big thing I learned was that when I closed out, and it's funny, I went back through the records to prepare for our interview today. And
wow, okay.
And I found, it was strange because I started looking at, because again, 104. We're both quasi math people, and if you're getting paid $144,000 for 1 year's worth of work,
$12,000 a month.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's exact. So going through the records for that year, for that first year, there were 0 checks that were written for $12,000.
Okay.
I went back through, every check was either for $10,000 or $20,000, with the exception of one check that was written for $5,000.
Okay.
And
none of those are divisible by 12.
None of those are divisible by 12. And when I added it all up, it was more than $144,000.
All right,
is what he pulled out.
Okay.
But the problem to me was that it wasn't just a little bit more than $144,000. Checks had been written to him or to his LLC in that first year, $260,000 worth of checks.
Wait, what?
$260,000 worth of checks was written
in a 1 12-month period.
in one 12-month period, which means that he received 100. Am I doing the math right? $116,000 more, almost double his salary.
Yeah,
Was
almost
what
double.
what he received. So his loan. The other thing that was eye popping to me at this point was that his loan because the other thing that we have to do because there was interest on this loan.
Sure.
And so I also had to calculate how much interest had accrued on the loan during the year, and I needed to roll that into the loan as well. So between the $116,000 of the loan and with the interest that accrued on it, I think we were talking around $140,000 was added onto his loan.
All right. So let's take a beat here. This guy is getting way more than he's contracted for, almost twice as much as he's contracted for.
Right.
How does that work? Like, how does he? But who's cutting the checks?
Oh, so okay, so basically this is how I just over time I sort of pieced this together, because one of the things I did not do at this point for this company was I was not printing checks or writing checks on behalf of this company.
Right.
So the best that I could gather,
which is something that sometimes firms do. Let's just people should know that don't know. That is something that isn't. If you were doing that, that wouldn't be unusual.
Right.
But in this case, you're saying you weren't doing.
I was not.
Okay.
No. And so the best that I can decipher, and I don't think I never really had to even ask the question, because what became clear over time is that when John Bolton needed money, he would have a check written to him, and he would, but he did not have authorization authority at the company. So he could write a check, he couldn't sign a check, is basically what it is.
Okay,
does that make sense?
So he was writing the checks.
He was basically preparing the checks, and just like he would have to prepare. And again, it wasn't really him. I think it was his wife that was mostly doing this.
Okay.
Would prepare the checks. He didn't have check signing authority, so he would prepare the checks to be signed. But then there'd be checks for utilities. There'd be checks for telephone. There would be checks for office supplies. There'd be checks for a bunch of different things that would have to be signed.
So
and
he's authorizing the payment, all these payments.
He's requesting all.
He's requesting them.
That's the best way to say it.
That's the best way to say it. You're right.
Yeah.
So he's requesting all these payments. Who's approving the payments?
There's about 10 different owners. Like I said, the owners at large was somewhere between 2 to 3 dozen at any given time.
Okay.
But there was about 10 of those owners who were considered kind of like the board of directors. They were the managing members of the LLC is what they were. And they all had check signing authority.
But
for
approval is different from signing a lot of times, right? But in this case, it doesn't sound like it was.
Same. Yeah. So this is authorization to sign checks is what we're talking about.
So also, in the parlance, you might say approval and execution. The request, the approval, and the execution.
Well, I would say requesting and approval were done by the boss. He would request the check and he'd say, yes, these are the checks that need to be signed.
Okay.
But then once they were prepared, still not signed, either he or his wife or someone else would take them to a doctor who just happened to have a break in their busy schedule and say, hey, these are the checks that need to be signed, so we need you to sign them.
Okay.
And the doctors, and this was my experience, is they would go through them, they'd ask any questions that they might see from that, but it wasn't always the same doctor who signed this that day or that week's stack of checks that needed to be signed. It would really be whoever was there the day that they needed, they had them and needed them signed, somebody who they could get in between patients to see. So it kind of made sense.
So the review process, so if I can just stop you. So the review, there was like in a lot of our stories, there's monitoring going on.
Right.
And in this case, it sounds like there was some monitoring, but the responsibility for that was spread amongst enough people that it wasn't consistent, and it's consistent enough to, like, for any one person to be like, I've seen a lot of checks to John Bolton and they're more than we pay him. So what's that about?
Right. And nobody signed all of the checks.
Right.
And
Different people
also,
are signing them.
when you get down to it, and again, they weren't, I mean, that would make sense. The one thing that's a little bit confusing to me, and I think this is just, again, the doctors are busy. They probably don't remember what that his pay was $144,000 a year.
Sure. Right.
So, because my first thing, if I was signing this check, go, oh, here's a check for this much. How much do you get paid every year? Is this, but they're not thinking that way. They're not asking those questions. They've got a waiting room full of patients that are angry because they've been there for twice as long as they expected to be there, that sort of stuff. So they're just trying to get back to business. So the monitoring stuff, completely ineffective the way that this is set up.
Okay.
Because the only way to monitor it is if you are to keep tally of what the dollar amount of checks is that you've signed so far this year. And then also compare that to the other doctors who might be signing. So really, there was effectively no monitoring going on.
Okay.
The monitoring was what I was being told to do at the end of the year. That was the monitoring.
Okay. So to recap, it's end of year, closing the books.
Yes.
John Bolton is supposed to be getting $144,000, and instead he is getting how much?
$260,000.
Okay, Greg, Kyte. His loan balance then, if he was supposed to get 144, okay, we'll do this math again.
Yeah.
He was supposed to get 144. He actually got 260. That's $116,000 more than he got. And if I understand you right, that excess amount is supposed to be added to a loan that currently exists on your client's books.
Yes,
okay.
Exactly.
And
but the loan didn't go up by 116. It went up. It was. I mean, again, I look back through. It went up closer to $136,000.
Okay.
Because of accrued interest, like we said.
Okay. Yeah. Because so it was a loan. It took some form of a loan. Like there was interest being charged to him.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So that's something.
But you're onto something. The other thing is there was zero money being repaid on this loan, which I don't know if you've ever had a loan before. Have you had a loan before?
I've had a loan before.
Me too.
Sure.
I've never had a loan where I didn't need to immediately start making
I've
payments.
always had, I look, maybe I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but in my experience, banks are kind of sticklers about that.
Right. You can't. I mean, it's not unheard of to get loans where maybe some of the initial payments are deferred. Like I think I got a car loan once where the first 3 months you didn't have to make a car payment.
Right.
But as soon as those 3 months are over, you had to. This was not the case. There just had been no debt service made on this loan.
All right, so that's not good. So tell me then, $116,000 in additional loan made, an additional $20,000 in accrued interest, $136,000. What is the total outstanding balance of this scare quotes loan, Greg?
At this point, at the end of 2008, the total balance for the loan was $540,000.
All right, and he's not making payments.
No.
Okay, and
there's
when
been
did
nothing repaid on this
Okay,
loan.
so another key thing about loans, as our listeners may or may not know, is when it originated. So, Greg, when did this loan? I'm using the scare quotes again. When did this loan originate?
So the loan started the best that I can find, again, because this was I had to look back in the records from before I ever even started. My going down the accounting.
Good Lord, did you have to go into like a dusty basement and
No. Fortunately, it was all still in QuickBooks. These guys have been using QuickBooks for a long time, but it was 2002.
Oh, wow.
This was, and I'm not sure exactly when in 2002 the loan started, but we were pushing 6 years that this loan had happened. Another fun fact about this loan, Caleb.
Yeah.
There was no loan documentation for this.
Oh, that's my favorite.
Yeah, there was not a contract. There was nothing signed.
Yeah,
nothing like that. So,
and again, for the maybe uninitiated in finance and accounting, that's a big no-no. Even if you're loaning it to your own employee, typically there is some documentation around these things.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and And similarly, so the way that this was expressed to me, not just by John Bolton, but also by my manager at the CPA firm, is it's a loan that he had been taking out to build and to finish a cabin that he had up in the woods. So the idea was that this cabin was collateral for the loan, but also no documentation showing that the cabin was held in escrow for this loan if it were to not be repaid, which again, if you don't have the documentation, it's not collateral for the loan.
Right. Okay. So so again, I'm going back to my old accountant auditor days, but that is 1,000% a related party transaction.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
And so, but there's no documentation for it.
Zero.
And you can, if you're in a undergraduate level auditing course, this is the kind of thing they would cover, and they say, okay, this is something that we're going to have to adjust the books for, right? But so then my question to you, Greg, is your firm, because you're still at the firm at this point, is your firm okay with all this?
The firm was fine with it.
Okay, I am a little surprised that they were okay with it.
Me too. I was, because here's the thing. I go. Everything. The dollar amounts on this whole thing was eye popping.
Yeah,
The fact that John Bolton was able to remove almost twice as much money as his contracted amount in a single year, that's shocking. The fact that this is set up basically like a line of credit for him.
Yes.
Because it's basically
he can draw on it at any time.
If you need money, just write another check. We're just going to add
Except
it to your
line
loan.
of credits require you to make payments.
They do require you to make payments, absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's sketchy, but also just the fact that it's over $500,000.
Yeah,
that's loan there. That's also pretty crazy. And I was also getting the vibe that nobody really liked this. Like the boss, super friendly guy, didn't really like talking about this loan. When it came up, you could tell not his favorite subjects. Like it's no big deal. Lots of executives at companies have loans from their company. Is how he would, and it's like, and my cabin's collateral, everything's fine on this. No big deal. The firm, and here's the other thing. I mean, back to his position and the power that he held is he unilaterally was the decision maker for who to hire for all of our services as a company. So he could just unilaterally fire my CPA firm if he decided to. So, and again, being not that price sensitive, it was a pretty decent sized client for the firm. So I know that my manager felt like she was kind of walking this tightrope of it's like, I need to disclose this loan that's going on, but I need to not to piss off John Bolton because he could send us packing at any minute.
Right.
And for as nice as he is, he could also have a bit of a temper.
Okay.
So you didn't want to get on John Bolton's bad side either.
Right. And this is not unusual when auditors are involved in some of the stories that we've done over the course of the podcast. Auditors, well, you weren't an auditor. You were doing accounting. You were the outsourced or fractional controller or whatever. But still, there is this kind of tricky balance that these firms have to take, which is pleasing a client because that's how they get paid. But also, accountants are rule followers. And so when a client seems to not be following the rules, maybe like they should, accountants kind of get like their relationships to the rules gets a little squishy because their relationship with the client sometimes takes precedence over the relationship with the rules.
Right. It's not supposed to.
It's not supposed to.
But in the real
world, it happens
often. It does. And that's the whole thing, because when we talk about auditors are supposed to be independent.
Correct.
But I was not independent.
You were not an auditor, though.
But I was not an auditor.
Different situation.
Yeah. And with a compilation, you're not required to be independent from your client. So it was okay that we were doing that based on the financial statements that were being produced by the CPA firm.
Right.
But yeah, the dirty secret of accounting is nobody in audit is truly independent because you're getting paid by the person that you're auditing.
That's right.
No one is textbook independent from their client.
Okay.
In that whole thing.
So All right. So you get through this end of year. You know all about this big hairy loan that
Yeah.
is a big messy related party transaction thing going on. What happens next?
Well, first off, and I need to make sure this is clear too.
Yeah.
My manager at the firm, she insists that she is telling the people who need to know about this loan, because to me, again, I'm like going, oh my gosh, it went up this much. Is that okay? I can't believe. Do we need to tell you? Did he do what's how? And she
Right.
and she's just kind of like going, don't worry about it. Every year I tell the people who need to know about
The loan.
about the loan,
Like
and
the
it's
outstanding
just,
balance, whatever.
yeah, and again, I can tell the loan makes her nervous, but also she tells me that everything's taken care of. I'm just the knucklehead on this engagement, so I go, okay, everything. I'm going to trust the people that I'm working with and working for,
Right.
that this is okay, because I'm being told by everyone that it is.
Okay.
So when I was getting close to my 1 year with the firm, I started talking with the boss about him hiring me in-house as their CPA, because I thought they could save some money. It would get me into a job that I enjoyed more. I thought it was just kind of it was a win-win, and maybe not a total win for the CPA firm, but people get hired away from CPA firms all the time.
They do. So who
so-
offered you the job? Did John Bolton offer you the job?
I proposed it to him.
You did.
I
Okay.
said, hey, I think this would be better for you, and I think it'd be better for me if you hired me in-house. Because
And
again,
he liked the idea.
and he liked the idea, because again, we were pals at this point. We were like, he really liked me, I really liked him. There was this one loan thing that seemed kind of weird, but everybody was convincing me everything was a-okay, and the people who needed to know did know about the loan.
Okay.
So I was all just like green lights going on, and I was excited to get this new job and start as the in-house CPA for this company.
Okay, so new job for Greg. How did things change when you went in-house?
No, not so much. I mean, it was really just kind of, at this point I had about, let's see, I'd probably had about 9 months experience of like how the books work, how my job works as an engagement. I knew how the company worked to the extent that I did at that point. So it was really just doing a lot of the same work that I was doing before, but just getting my paycheck from a different place.
Right.
And again, I was intrigued by the job, because they also since they did not have an in-house accountant who was like trained in accounting,
Mm-hmm.
there was a whole lot of stuff that I just had to like clean up
Okay.
inside there. Like there was a lot of problems that just kind of had these Band-Aid fixes, and had more Band-Aids put on top of those Band-Aid fixes over years. So it was kind of like pulling off these layers and layers of Band-Aids to figure out what originally happened. How can we make this simpler? How can we make this cleaner? How can we make it a little bit more straightforward? And I thought that was just endlessly interesting to me.
Yeah.
That kind of work. So it was basically doing what I was doing before, the stuff that I was enjoying before, but even to a further extent, and I didn't have to go to any other engagements that I thought were horrible.
Okay. So the question on everyone's mind, including
Yes.
mine,
Yes.
is now that you're in-house, what's going on with the loan? Like what is that something that you are monitoring in a different way or more closely, or like what's going on there?
Initially, no, I wasn't monitoring it more closely at all, because I had been reassured that everything was a-okay.
Okay.
But also in the back of my mind, I go, this thing seems like it's big and somewhat out of control. And so I didn't monitor it very much closer than I had before. But the end of the year came again. I had to close the books out for the first year that I was in-house CPA. And in that year,
2009, right?
this was 2009. And in that year, between additional principal and accrued interest, the loan increased by another $170,000.
Wait a minute. So let's hold
$170,000.
So to maybe just take a step back to remind the audience, he was contracted to get 144,
yes,
and anything in excess of the 144 was put on his tab, essentially.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Which is this loan.
Yes.
And you're telling me that the following year, after 132,000 was added,
136.
Another 170. Well, yeah, 116 plus the 20 grand in interest.
Yeah.
You're telling me that an additional 170,000 in principal and interest was added.
Yes, and if you and the
So that is double what he was contracted to be paid.
yeah.
That is more than double.
Well, it's more than double if you count the accrued interest for sure. I think the principal amount that he pulled out that year probably. I guess I don't have those dollar figures in front of me, but yeah, it was probably equal to his annual salary, and that also put his balance for the loan over $700,000
Right.
for that year.
And he's still not making payments.
And in 2009 he made 0 payments toward this loan.
Okay.
And
so how are you feeling about this?
Incredibly uncomfortable. Just incredibly uncomfortable because again, he doesn't want to talk about it. And
did you try to talk to?
I did. Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I did. Well, at this point, I'm so uncomfortable, and I am now the in-house CPA, and and I guess I was in the middle of my MBA program. I'm wanting to get licensed as a CPA.
Yes.
Because I've got my hours. I don't have all the the credits I needed, and I hadn't passed the exam yet. But that was my whole thing. And I'm going, The last thing I want is right out of the gate to get embroiled in something that was criminal. Now, again, to reiterate, nothing that happened in this story or in the actual events that this story is based upon was actually criminal or was prosecuted. But I was worried about it. This was a big concern to me. And so what I did after closing the books out for that first year, I was like, I have to make this very clear to the member managers of this LLC that I now work for what's going on with this loan.
Right.
And so
now are you working with your former firm on this at this point?
At this point, I mean, not so much, because at this point I had taken over all the. I mean, this was bookkeeping and CFO kind of stuff at this point, which was all me at this point. So
you're doing this of your own accord. Like you're not talking to your former firm and saying, now that I'm on this side of it, it's kind of like not looking totally kosher.
No, I didn't bring it up with them.
Okay.
I didn't bring up my concerns with them because I knew that they were satisfied with what somehow. And again, that's confusing to me as in terms of how they were satisfied with how things were going.
Because firms talk a lot about getting comfortable, and I just don't know. Like that. I think that's the question in mind. I was like, how did they get comfortable with that?
Right. And again, I also. That's a unanswered question for me. And I would not be surprised if this had all devolved into some sort of criminal investigation, if the CPA firm, they likely would have been implicated with this and I could see a scenario in which they would have been found to be negligent in their duties.
Okay, well,
with the company, but again, that's
speculation aside.
All speculation.
Speculation aside, you are bringing this new loan balance, which is now in excess of $700,000.
Yes,
you're bringing it to the attention of the shareholders / owners of this business.
to the board.
So
subset of the owners.
So like the 10 or so people.
Yes.
That are kind of like in charge.
Yes, and the people to whom I have been assured that they, on an annual basis, are being caught up,
made aware of this.
Made aware of the loan.
Yeah,
and when I bring it up with them, they are saying we had no idea that this was happening. Maybe we had an idea that this was happening. We had no idea to the extent at which this was happening. We had no idea that there was no money being paid back on this loan.
And so, did you at this point when they say that to you? Like, do you remember how that made you feel?
Oh yeah. Well, again, it made me very confused because I was told something that was very different than the facts that I was finding. But I also, I felt, well, I guess there's two main ways that I felt. One, I felt reassured that I was doing the right thing because now I go, everybody, the people who need to know about this, now they know.
Now
about
they
it.
know about it.
And that made me feel good.
Okay.
The thing that made me feel bad was that I also, just like how John Bolton had unilateral authority to fire the CPA firm and get a new CPA firm, he was my boss.
Yeah.
He had unilateral authority to fire me,
Right.
and to replace me or to not to replace me, to do whatever. My career was in his hands.
If I understand it right, like he just serves at the pleasure of the board, and they give him full. He had full reign to run the business because that's what he was hired to do.
Yes,
And so,
exactly.
Yeah, that means hiring, everything, like literally everything. Like
literally everything.
So, okay, so then if he serves at the pleasure of the board, you bring this stuff to the board, and they're just like, we had no fucking idea that this was the situation.
Right.
So then what did they do?
Well, that's the thing. And this was the weird thing. And this is where we don't typically get here with the cases that we cover on the podcast, because what I found is there was these weird, like, backwards interpersonal and even kind of like psychological consequences of what had happened with this whole thing.
So what do you mean? So yeah, what do you mean by that?
So what I mean is that the board of directors is made aware of this $700,000 loan that really that's not that has no documentation. Their whole
has no
thing
documentation. He's not making payments. It's like right there. A supposed cabin is the collateral,
right,
which is obviously for personal use. So that that's a big related party issue. So like so lots of weird stuff going on.
So this looks horrible.
Yes.
For the company and for the board. And like I said, the board then was very concerned that if the membership, if all the owners of the company found out what had happened on their watch, they would get strung up. They'd be like, how the hell could you, as the managing members of this company, how could you have let this happen?
Right.
So they were motivated to take care of it in a quiet manner.
Okay.
And a quiet manner does not include suddenly firing the guy
right.
who owes the company $700,000. Right. The other weird thing is John Bolton at this time is in his early 60s. And so this was his only job that he'd had since the 80s.
Okay.
So he's pushed, he's let's see. He was pushing 40 years with the company at this point. If he had been let go from his position here, the concern was, how could he possibly get another job where he could make enough money to repay the loan that he owes to us? So the only way this loan is going to get repaid is if we keep him on staff and we pay him his salary, through which he will then repay us the loan that he took from us, which is the weirdest way to get job security in the history of business.
There seems to be there seems that it would be an easier way to go about it. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So so there's these, but the other weird thing is I have to figure out how to tiptoe through this minefield that I'm involved in, where it's like, I need to be transparent with the board, but I also want to not get myself fired from my job.
Right.
And so the way I approach John Bolton with this whole thing is I'm like going, dude, you've seen, I've given you the reports. You owe $700,000 to this company. We need to, this looks bad for you. I need to help you.
Yeah.
You need to figure out how to back this up, how to get out of this pickle that we're in, because this is a big damn deal. And so I think that's how I remember approaching it with him.
Right. So then was he pissed at you that you brought this up, or like, because you said earlier that he got real prickly around this subject.
Right.
So then like what happened with your relationship?
It became increasingly more tense over time. But again, I tried to frame it as I want to help. I can't not tell them about this, because that would be my ass in a sling, and that's my job. But also, I want to do what I can to help you get out of this pickle that you found yourself in, where you owe $700,000 to this company. And so again, it was difficult, but looking back on it, the thing that I still can't quite figure out is why it never crossed John Bolton's mind, I should just fire Greg.
Okay, Greg. So there's a lot of tension inside the company. For the first time, the board has a real understanding of like the breadth and depth of this loan situation.
Yeah.
Which is a nice thing to call it, a loan situation.
Right.
There's tension between you and John Bolton. But you are, I think, I mean, the way you described it, like looking back on it, you're like, it's like, I was trying to help him get him out of this jam he was in.
Right.
Now, did you feel like looking back on that now, do you feel like you handled that as best you could, or would you do it if you were in a similar circumstance now? Would you do it differently?
No, I'm very proud of how I handled this
Okay.
situation. Yeah, I think throughout, I felt like I did the right thing. Really, if I could have done something differently up to this point in the story, it would have been kind of what you were talking about earlier, where it's like that my first 6 months as an in-house employee, monitoring those payments that were being made to him more closely.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that I could have done, that I could see that I could have done differently.
Okay. So 2009 wraps, you close the books, you're into 2010. So then what happens in 2010?
2010, him taking extra payments that goes away.
Okay.
At this point, I'm concerned enough about it. The board's concerned enough about it that it's like he can't take any additional principal towards this loan.
Right.
That
So he has to live on the $12K a month.
Right.
And just live with it, man.
Just
live with
try
your
your
12
best.
grand a month.
Exactly. And and in that year, he also, it's the first time he started making payments.
Okay.
On this $700,000 loan.
Well, I'm sure that really cramped his style.
It did. Well, it didn't. Because so he started making monthly payments of $400 to his $700,000 loan.
Good Lord. That's like a fucking used Toyota Camry.
Yeah, it is. It is. I bought a Subaru Crosstrek in 2010, and I paid a $7,000 or $8,000 down payment on it, and my payment on that is over $400 a month on my Crosstrek.
Right. So he's still getting a sweetheart deal.
He is. Well, but here's the kicker too.
Oh,
is
there's a kicker?
Yes, is that at that point it was like, hey, you have to start making some kind of like good faith payment on this loan. And so he said, well, it's been years and years since I've received a raise from the company. So I'm not shitting you. He got a $400 a month raise, and he started paying that $400 a month. So that was where he got the $400 a month to pay towards his loan every month. So, but he also, there was also some other money that was coming in towards the loan, because he was also, there's a sister company, another commercial medical office building, and he was an owner in that sister company, and he was getting cash distributions on a monthly basis from that sister company. So this company required that he use those distributions from the other company to service this loan as well. So in 2010, he did start making some payments. He was not taking more money out of the company than he was supposed to at this point, but because of interest still that's accruing on this loan, even with the payments, even with these massive $400 a month payments, the loan was still increasing, and in 2010 it still went up by another $20,000 just because of the interest.
All right, for a sweetheart deal, he was still getting like loan shark rate. Well, it wasn't a loan shark rate. You said it was a favorable but reasonable rate.
It was a favorable,
but he still wasn't making enough payment. His payments weren't enough to satisfy the VIG, as they say.
Right. Well, and yeah. So we, like I said, we had a very close relationship with our banks who loaned us the money to loan out to our doctors. That's another reason why this kind of didn't feel too weird, I think, to him or to the member managers, because they all had loans from the building too. Right. But they had them to buy into they made these were.
But they also had the loans with banks, and those banks require paperwork and signatures.
Yes, and we had for all the loans that the company executed to its members, we had all the paperwork for all those loans, and people were making monthly payments every month towards those, and they were getting paid down in principal, not going up in principal.
Right.
So,
Okay, so he's the VIG is still running up. He's still running up a balance because he's not paying enough, but he is making payments.
yes.
So then what?
So the story, like I said, was that this loan was for him to build a cabin.
Yeah.
So the board eventually said, "Hey, if you've got this cabin, you should get an actual loan from an actual bank
Right.
on your cabin." And they basically forced him to do this. They said, "Okay, you have to go to the bank and get this loan on your cabin, and you have to pay us the proceeds from this loan to pay off your loan with the building." And again, if the loan made sense for the cabin that he owned, he should be able to get a loan on the cabin that was enough to pay off his debt with the building. But the loan that he actually got, and this was, I mean, at this point, we're talking the beginning of 2012, he took out this loan on his cabin, but the amount that he was able to get on his cabin loan was $412,000.
Okay.
So he still had
a little short.
Still had over $300,000 on his loan after pulling after getting this loan together. And here's what was very strange. There was other strange things that happened about this cabin loan that he did get from a bank. Like I said, we had huge loans with this bank, not just from our company, but also from the sister company.
Yep.
And John Bolton, he didn't say it right out loud, but he hinted at it and made it pretty clear to our bank that we bank with that it's like, if you don't give me this loan on my cabin, I will take our 20 to it was probably more like $30 million worth of loans we have with your bank, and we will take them to a different bank.
Oh, playing hardball.
Yeah, he was playing big time hardball, but the bank was still like, yeah, we still can't do that because you're not a good credit for our bank. And so the only way that they would give him a loan is if he had a cosigner on the loan.
Okay.
So smooth talking John Bolton was able to go to a doctor who was a member of the board of this company and say, he pitched it like this: you will get a 50% ownership interest in my cabin if you co-sign on this loan for me.
And
the board member co-signed on the loan for him, and that's how he got the loan for the $412,000.
Okay, so somehow John Bolton gets board member to co-sign this loan.
Yeah.
So that he can pay a good chunk of it back, of the quote unquote loan back. What else happened? Was there anything, did he have anything else that he could use to kind of like, he's just trying to make good at this point.
He's trying to not lose his job at this point.
Yeah.
Because he's got some,
well, if he doesn't make good, he's going to lose his job.
Yeah. He has to make some serious, that's the way that this is coming down, is you've got to fix this. And again, I don't think it was said right out loud, at least not when I was around, but maybe some of the board members made it clear to him that it's like, if this doesn't get dealt with, it's going to cost you your job. And again, he absolutely did not want to lose this job.
All right.
So the other place that he had some resources, like I said, is he owned a significant amount in that sister company to this company.
Okay.
So what the company that I worked for, that he worked for at this board, what they did is they said, you have to assign us your shares in this other company, and we'll credit your loan with the building for that.
They just had to agree on what they were worth, right?
Which that was the kicker.
Sure.
They decided that they would credit his account $280,000 for the shares in the sister company.
And there was like, what you said, 300 left?
There's 300 left. So, but interest had still been accruing.
Sure.
So after they credited the $280,000 for this ownership interest in the sister company, he still had about $60,000 left over at the end of that year.
Damn.
in his balance. But here was the big thing: the amount that he owned in the sister company was originally valued at $200,000. And it's not that he paid $200,000 into the sister company. It was credited to him and given to him as ownership for sweat equity as he was part of the process of developing that other company. So was it actually worth $200,000? Well, was it actually worth $280,000, which is what they credit for? And in my mind, because I was also doing some of the accounting for that other sister company, I was going, at most, it's worth the $200,000 that he was originally given as sweat equity in that company, likely less than that.
All right.
But again, they gave him $280,000 for it. That brings his total loan balance down to just $60,000. So
so you more or less fixed it.
More or less fixed it. Yeah.
Over 700K down to 60.
Yeah. It kind of fixed it, but there's a little bit more.
Okay. So John Bolton, does he completely kind of escape consequences for the scare quote loan?
Yes.
Oh,
he absolutely escaped all consequences.
So he kept his job.
He kept his job. Now the thing is, he didn't completely escape consequences in general.
Okay.
So
right.
Here's what happens
He lost he had to give up half a cabin.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Half a cabin, and he had to assign his ownership in another seemingly valuable business. So
right. Yeah. So those are a couple of consequences. Yeah, that's true. Those are some very real life consequences, but. So those are consequences also related to his loan. But some other consequences that came up is when I closed the books for 2013.
Okay, so we're 2013 now.
So now we're in 2013.
Okay.
Well, we're actually in 2014 because I'm closing the books for 2013.
Okay, gotcha. Yep.
And he and I knew that things were not looking good throughout the year. I had been keeping up with this, but the final numbers when I actually officially closed the books was that he overspent our budget for expenses for the building by about 15 to 16%.
Okay.
So our annual budget was about $1 million for all the expenditures that were related to the property, and he had overspent it by about $160,000.
Okay.
For that year, which that's in terms of variances, 16% variance on your budget, that's huge overspending.
Yeah, you blew through that budget.
Yeah, like big time. But the other problem, and this is what I'm talking to him going, we blew through the budget and we didn't tighten the belt for 2014. Like how are we not going to just blow through the 2014 budget even more than we blew through the 2013 budget? And he just would not give me an answer for how he's going to make things, keep us in the black, get us back to the being in the black as a company. And again, I'm still a young accountant, and I'm going, I am not going to be the CPA who sits by while his company goes bankrupt, because how am I going to get my next job? They're going to be like, oh, tell us about your last employer. Oh, they went bankrupt. Oh, while you were the CFO? Yeah, while I was the CFO.
Yeah,
oh,
did
that just kind of come out of nowhere? Nope, I saw it coming actually for quite a while. That's what I was thinking was going to. Yeah, not good at all.
That's not a story you want to tell.
Not good at all. It was so, and I kept coming up with these ideas of going, here's some ways where we could save some money. Here's some ways where we could trim the fat.
Yeah.
And I'd present him to it, and he'd be like, it's not going to make him, and he wasn't wrong, but he's like, it's not going to make a big enough difference. So he just kind of was like, I don't even want to do them. And it's like, if you're not even willing to make some difference. So basically it became, I had to go to the board at this point and say, it's either him or it's me, because this which I hated, because I felt like I was stabbing my friend in the back.
Ultimatums are risky.
It was super risky, and they very well could have said, it's you, it's not him. It's him. It's you losing your job, not him.
You.
Right. Exactly. So, but they did this finally, and again, it wasn't looking good for him with the board anyways because of the loan fiasco.
Yeah.
And so they did decide to let him go in mid-2014. But
okay.
They did that, and he still had, at this point, he had about $50,000 left on the loan. They forgave the last $50,000 of the loan, and
very magnanimous.
And they gave him an $18,380 severance check at the end of all this as well. How they did that, why they did that, how they came up with $18,380, I have no idea. But that was the decision made by the board, and that's how his relationship with the company ultimately ended.
All right. So any loose ends you want to tie up, Greg?
Yeah. So you remember that $280,000 that they credited his account for his?
Yeah.
So those membership units in that other sister company finally sold a couple of years later, and they didn't sell for $280,000. Caleb, they sold for $180,000. So the company effectively didn't just write off $50,000 of his loan; they wrote off $150,000 of his loan. Also, I've had a few off-of-the-record conversations indicating that John Bolton may have never paid a dime on that cabin loan.
That's fantastic.
But instead, the board member who co-signed on the cabin loan paid every single payment. I cannot verify that. And technically, that's still not a crime. That's not fraud. That's what co-signers signed up to do.
Yes.
Is if the person on the loan doesn't make the payment, I'll make the payment. But the board member, again, from what I've heard, the board member made all the payments on that loan.
And now they have a cabin.
But the interesting thing, if you're doing all the math, the company recovered all of the principal that John Bolton took out of the company. So again, what they lost, the $150,000, arguably that was all just interest that had accrued on this loan. And when we talk about different, whatever fraud, pick any fraud that we've covered on this podcast. Mm-hmm. We don't say, well, this is how much they stole. Plus, if you accrued interest on that for however long they were stealing that money, here's how much interest. We're just like happy if the company is able to get some of their money back. And the company, this company was able to get all of the money back that was taken from the company. That's a huge win for any company that has any kind of shenanigans going on. So really, the company was more or less made whole by the end of the whole process.
All right, Greg. Thank you for regaling us with your personal story of not fraud.
Not fraud.
But anyway, did we learn anything?
We did.
Okay.
I mean, I'm interested to know. Well, here, I'll tell you these are the things. I've been learning things from this for a decade. Because all this stuff wrapped up about 10 years ago. So, but I'm interested to hear if there's anything that you learned from my story of not fraud. But some of the things I do think it's incredibly interesting, the weird interpersonal dynamics that arise between the actual human individuals who are involved with fraud. Like I said, with this one, it was insane to me that John Bolton was able to just fall head over ass into additional job security by taking out this loan from the company, because the board was embarrassed, the board was ashamed, the board was fearful of consequences that might be coming their way if this all became public. And also, like I said, the fact that their only hope for him to repay the loan was to keep him employed with the company. And actually, again, seeing that front row, I think that was not so much a strategy that happened, but keeping him employed and basically forcing his hand to take out the loan on the cabin and to turn over the shares in the sister company. That was all. I mean, again, I don't think that was some master plan strategy, but keeping him employed and having his employment be held in the balance if he didn't do those things was really the way that they recovered their money.
Yeah.
But like I said, it just that was it was really strange. It reminds me of the Roslyn School District.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Because there was some weird interpersonal dynamics like that, where they found that Pam Gluckin who is the business administrator for the school district, they found that she had stolen some money, like $250,000.
Right.
And the principal, who had also, both the principal and the business manager had stolen, millions and millions of dollars from the school district, but only $250,000 came out. And he's like, well, let's just fire her quietly. She'll repay the money. Then no harm, no foul. And she's gone. And then we don't have to make a big deal out of it. And the board was like, yeah, that'd be best for us. We have a reputation to uphold.
Right.
We don't want this to get out of hand. It's very similar dynamics that we saw to that.
Right. And so as far as like postscripts, like, so is John Bolton still around?
I have not seen him since his last day working for the company.
Damn. Okay.
I possibly because I am one of those people who, when I'm out in the wild, I don't pay very close attention to my surroundings.
Oh.
So like I've always worried about just running into him or running into his wife, like at Costco or something like that. And we may have had some close brushes, but like I said, I'm often oblivious to the people around me. And what's going on, so that and also I could see them going, oh no, they're them spotting me first, and
right,
and
turning on their heels and going the other way.
Exactly. Exactly.
As far as like the owners are concerned, like we're you talked about how they wanted to resolve this quietly. Like, do you feel like that there was any like how did have people made their peace with this era of their business, like that this
yes
and it's just like, well, that's something that happened, and like it and they feel like has everyone moved on, or like is there still kind of I don't know about, it's not resentment, because eventually they like you said, they got the money back and everything was kind of like handled as good as you could hope for. Probably better than you could hope for, and as you pointed out, if you get the principal back, like in a lot of cases, victims are usually lucky to get 20 or 30% back of what they lost. So anything as far as I guess the victims in this case, like do you feel, how do you feel? I mean, I'm asking you to speak for people, but how do you think? Is there any victim blaming to go around? I suppose I shouldn't ask you that because it's your job, but because you're still there, so maybe we scratch all that. I don't know.
Well, no. I think I mean there definitely is victim blaming that can and should be meted out towards I'd say towards the board, and it's hard for me to say, and I guess I'm hoping that no one that I work with and work for ever listens to this episode. But I know that the members of the board who are still members of the board, which is a sizable chunk, surprisingly enough, after a decade, that the ones that I still have conversations with about this thing that happened, there's still a lot of shame that they have, where it's like they're still embarrassed, they still wish it didn't happen. But that said, is that we after he was let go, we did a massive restructuring of the entire company, and the team that was about 10 people was reduced to about to 3. And just based on salary, the savings that we had from a personnel standpoint, we were able to. I mean, obviously, this loan situation was rectified in and of itself, but then we were able to turn around the spending with the company. So really, we're in a stronger financial position now than we ever have been before. Also, the board definitely learned lessons from that, and they did. There's a lot of controls that have been placed on me because I'm now the new John Bolton at the company, and there's reporting requirements that they put in for me, and also reporting requirements that I gladly comply with every single month, because I'm like going, I need everyone to understand that this is a completely different governance situation than the company was in before. So I'm happy to do all of that, and I still to this day I'm convinced that, so really there was one internal control that was in place, and that was that John Bolton couldn't sign checks. And I'm convinced that if John Bolton had signed John Bolton's checks that were written payable to John Bolton, that this likely would have gone a very different direction, and that's probably what saved his bacon from just not getting fired right off the bat and possibly getting authorities pulled in on this whole thing as well. And to this day, I will never have check signing authority at this company because because again, lessons learned are lessons learned. So I don't want that and never will have that.
All right, that's it for this episode. Remember, it's not fraud if it was a loan.
Also remember, in this case, it wasn't a fraud. It was a loan.
If you want to drop us a line, send us an email at ohmyfraud@earmarkcpe.com. Greg, Kyte, where can people find you on the internet?
Best place to find me is probably on LinkedIn. I am Greg Kyte, CPA on LinkedIn, and my life has been so busy lately that I'm sure I am neck deep in DMs that are waiting to be replied to, and I promise I will get to them before the end of the year.
That's not much of a promise.
It's not much of a promise, but that's the level of promise that I can make. Caleb, where can people find you out there?
I am Caleb Newquist, and you can find me on LinkedIn /Caleb Newquist. Oh My Fraud is written by Greg Kyte and me, Caleb Newquist. Our producer is Zach Frank. Rate, review, and subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. If you listen on Earmark, get some CPE. Greg has a CPE, so
I do. I'm all set.
He's good. All right. Join us next time for more avarice, swindlers, and scams from stories that will make you say, oh my,
not a fraud.